welcome back to Law and Crime. If you're just joining us, I'm Bob Bianchi. The trial of Doomsday court mom Lori Vallow Daybell is finally nearing its end. After more than a month of hearing audio of the trial, Judge Boyce just ruled today that the verdict, however, will be live streamed. Now, we will definitely cover that at the time here at the Law&Crime Network when that happens. Lori Vallow Daybell is charged with the murders of her two youngest children, Tylee and JJ, and conspiracy in the death of her husband's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Our very own Gigi McKelvey, as I told you before, who's been at the scene watching all of this as it breaks down, is at the courthouse, outside the courthouse right now in Boise, Idaho, to recap the latest. Gigi, good afternoon. We were surprised by Judge Boyce's ruling about allowing something to be streamed inside that courtroom. What happened?
Yeah, I don't know. We all about fell out of the pew when we all read that online. So, yeah, that's a good thing. I think, a lot of people that aren't able to come sit in this trial, including family members, need to see this verdict. And so I think it's a good call by Judge Boyce to show the world, what this jury comes up with.
Yeah, Gigi, one question I think a lot of people are going to be asking right now is, based on what you're seeing inside that courtroom, one, I know that as a lawyer, you could be in there and when the jury has just heard enough. We got it, we understand it, yet we want to make sure we squeeze every drop out we can because we don't want to take a chance. Do you get the sense that the jury's got it, it's there, it wants to move on? And secondly, if you could, do you think Lori's going to testify?
Well, I have seen the jury look a little more over it this week. I think that, it's been 5 weeks of testimony and they've heard about everything. Now, I will tell you, this happens at trials frequently, but there are rumblings that maybe there's a little back and forth about maybe whether or not she takes the stand. I would love to see it, but here's the thing. Lori has always, in her own mind, and has successfully weaseled her way out of very tight spots with law enforcement every time she's been confronted. She was offered a victim's advocate 45 minutes after sitting down the day Charles Vallow was murdered. So in her mind, does she think she can do that with this jury? We'll see. I kind of hope so.
Yeah, well, pride comes before the fall, but I guess we'll figure out whether or not that's true or not. And I'm sure prosecutors are chomping at the bit to have her get on the stand as well. It is a very delicate conversation, but it depends on the evidence that's been presented so far that the defense attorneys are going to be counseling her. Will you seal your own fate if you get on the stand? Or are they going to argue that the government hasn't proven significant parts of the case? So tell me, especially as it relates to Tammy's murder, is there enough there in your mind?
That's the one charge that I think we all have discussed today that is questionable. It just seems like there's a lot of Chad and Alex. And I mean, if you know the story, there's no doubt she knew it was going to happen. She probably, all these text messages actually that we learned about, calls and texts, like 90 calls and text messages over the key dates of when she was shot at and murdered. But unfortunately, the context of those text messages were never recovered. So that could have been the undoing right there in getting that conviction for Tammy. But then again, this jury can use their common sense. And a lot of things look really bad for Lori. So I'm very interested to see. But I do think if there's one hang up, it might be that charge right there.
Let me ask you, based on the evidence we were just asking our previous guest, that I've prosecuted cases where, there's this manipulation going on and, loin to loin, kiss, whatever, cheek to cheek, and on, and I love you, and you're my angel, and and they literally can manipulate somebody to do some very bad things. Is the prosecution's argument essentially this was what was going on, and then eventually Chad's like, I got to get her, Tammy, out of my way. This is a problem, and that she participated in the murder for that reason. Is that the argument being made?
I mean, in a roundabout way, they haven't just really come out and said that. They've shown that Lori, especially yesterday, a lot of text messages from Lori to Chad was sort of her breaking up with him because she was impatient at that point. She was a free woman. Charles had been murdered by her brother, Alex. Chad, on the other hand, was still married. They were having to work around graduations when they couldn't see each other, and, sneaking around obviously isn't easy. So I just feel like that right now they haven't shown that definitive proof. Other than the fact that maybe Lori pushed him along, but pushing somebody along doesn't necessarily mean conspiracy. And that's kind of what the general consensus of people I've talked to here feel. as well.
Yeah, so, okay, I was eavesdropping on you as you were getting ready and they were getting ready to do your shot and everything, and I couldn't tell who was off camera that you were talking to, and I hope you don't mind me asking this, but people were talking about whether this will be a fast verdict or not, and there was some debate about whether it would or wouldn't. What is that debate, and what are your thoughts?
Well, it was me talking to the amazing Law&Crime executive producer, Kathy Russin, and we both agree. Yeah, I love Kathy. She's here. She is right here. But I do think that could be the one charge that makes deliberations go way longer.
Yeah, I was thinking the same exact thing, that if that's an issue, they could be very quick on one piece of a verdict, but really need to take their time with the other one. Talk to me about the courtroom in terms of the lawyering and the judge, because we've seen some trials lately where there's a lot of acrimony and anger and things of that nature. How are they playing in the sandbox?
I have to say, this is one of the smoothest trials I've ever sat in. There have been no hiccups. Everybody's been respectful. There has been no tension between the parties or the judge or anybody. It's actually went off way better than I thought it would. Just with the lead up, it was a little dicey getting here. But as far as the trial itself, I mean, it has just went along smooth like butter.
Well, I know that when we were first asking you to comment, you were cold when you were out there, and now your clothing is starting to get more summery, so you've been there for quite a while. And we take it day by day, and it's coming to a close, but what do we expect for the rest of today?
We really anticipate the state may rest after lunch. We heard 2 more witnesses. We've had 2 witnesses this morning. There's some matters they want to take up outside the presence of the jury, so that's what's going to happen after lunch break. And then we'll see from there. So maybe we will know today whether or not Lori Vallow chooses to take the stand. If she does, I'm here for it.
Yeah. And obviously you don't want to be talking to me when that happens, I'm sure. But let me ask you, as far as closings are concerned, has the judge set any timetable for when he wants closings or when the judge wants closings to begin?
We haven't heard anything about that at all. The only thing we've heard, other than the verdict being live streamed, is that if you're here for verdict, it is going to be first come, first serve. So that might be something you want to whip your camera out for, because it could get ugly getting in that courtroom for verdict.
Okay, now listen, we also know that prosecutors try to put on their best witnesses in the beginning and in the end, and the defense tries to do the same. The final witnesses, were they the knock your socks off kind of witnesses, or did they go flat kind of at the end?
I mean, today, the last 2 witnesses brought in a couple of new things. Just the number of communications between the parties at key times with Tammy was interesting, but without context, it kind of fell flat. Yesterday, I think the FBI agent that was on the stand for the whole day yesterday really was the one who kind of brought a lot of stuff together, a lot of those incriminating texts about the kids and things like that. So these last 2 witnesses, they weren't terrible, of course, but I would have ended yesterday with the FBI agent. It was very powerful testimony.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't, it's really hard to put a case together and witness availability and things like that. And probably in all likelihood, that's what the prosecutor wanted, but maybe there was an availability issue. But nevertheless, it's towards the end of the case, so that was a strong point for them. Thoughts, anything else that our audience needs to know about what you have found to be different than when you first started this, when you first started covering, and now you've gone all the way through this that you did not expect at the beginning?
Oh, honestly, I didn't expect it could be any worse than what I thought in my head happened to these kids, but it ended up being way worse. This has been one of the most difficult trials I've ever sat in. I've covered this for 3.5 years. I know Kay and Larry very well, love them dearly. And just what happened to these kids and Tammy and Charles is unbelievable. The story itself, just with the religious, I don't even want to say religious layer over it, it's just unbelievable. But ultimately, what they did to those children, to Tammy and Charles, it's something I'll never forget.
Gigi, I want just one last question. We were talking to our previous guests about this very thing. The oddness of the religious thing, the doomsday scenarios, the demons and all of that. And there's a big difference between being mentally unsound and being not guilty by reason of insanity. I obviously don't believe we're going to be listening to that argument being made, or the judge will permit that argument to be made. Prosecutors done a pretty good job that this was, regardless of how mentally ill they may have been, they knew what they were doing.
Right. And Lori chose not to bring mental illness in as part of her defense. There's no insanity in Idaho, so that was out the window. But I do think that one thing I was thinking, are you going to maybe have that one juror that has heard these podcasts that we've listened to in court or read these text messages about the religious stuff and think, maybe she just kind of lost it. But I just haven't seen anybody on that jury that seems sympathetic. But it's been such an interesting case. And then we have Chads to go. So there'll be even, the same set of evidence, but maybe a little more in regards to Tammy Daybell because he's the one that's actually having the murder charge for murdering her. So it's going to be interesting to see how this wraps up. I'll be live tweeting for Law&Crime Network, so you can find it there first. If she is going on the stand, I will let you guys know. That's the big weight right now is, does the state rest? Does she take the stand? Otherwise, we've heard they have no witnesses that they intend to call. So this could go to closings maybe tomorrow.
Well, I'm going to let you go because I know that if I keep it too long and you miss any of that testimony, should it be on the witness stand, I'll never hear the end of it. So Gigi McKelvey doing a great job out there. Law&Crime legal correspondent. Thanks, Gigi.
Thank you.
You got it. Okay, and on that note, we'll take a break with some excellent guests coming up. Please stay with us.